tell you about the time that I lived in Patton Oswalt's apartment? It was only 1 month, and it was a long time ago in a previous century, the most recent one. And I was moving from Los Angeles to San Francisco at about the same time that Patton and his writing partner, Blaine Capatch, another hilarious comedian, were moving to Los Angeles to embark on this next big part of their career, actually. So, excuse me while I get rid of something there. For those of you who don't know, of course, Patton is one of the best and best-known comedians working today. And we knew each other a little bit, and I got a call from him. He had heard that I was moving to San Francisco, and he wondered if I wanted to sublet his apartment because him and Blaine had gotten a job writing for Mad TV. And I think it was the first big writing job that they had, and it led to great things for both of them, and obviously went on to many awesome things. And Blaine, you'll be hearing more about from me. So he wondered if I was like to sublet his apartment because he was eating it on the last month of a year lease. And I was somewhat homeless. I had decided to move to San Francisco, and I was crashing with another comedian out in Berkeley, Kevin Kataoka. But at the same time, Jim Short, yet another comedian, he also had arrived and was crashing at Kevin's. And Kevin lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and he already had a roommate sleeping on the couch. That was Vernon Chatman, who's gone on to an amazing writing career. And Kevin's done a lot of TV and writing stuff. So everyone here has done really well, except me maybe. But here I am. I'm doing fine. I heard you laugh, Matt. So I lived for a month just off Haight Street, in the Haight, in San Francisco, with Jim Short crashing there with me. And there was one other roommate. Blaine and Patton had moved to LA, but there was another guy who I basically knew a little bit, not quite as well as Blaine and Patton. His name's Matt North, and why don't we just bring him in, Matt? Thanks for being here. So, Matt, I was there a month. I'm not sure I ever saw you in that apartment. So you're another comedian, and I don't know how you came to live with those guys, and if you knew that. I know that they had come from the East Coast. I don't know where you really came from.
Oh, I came from the Midwest. I'm from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois.
My father went to college there.
Oh, wow, hey!
That was his alma mater.
I had no idea.
So,
Yeah.
I'm all over the map on this one, but I feel like, were you like, did you have a girlfriend? Were you not there at all? Because I don't even remember seeing you much back then. We were already kind of friends, but yeah.
I was enjoying my time out on the town around San Francisco quite a bit. Maybe going from one place to the next, sleeping on different couches. But you're correct. At the time, I did have a girlfriend over in Noe Valley. And then
all these memories. Where was the apartment?
At that time where I was spending that one? Oh, man.
Pierce.
It was 343 Pierce. On the corner of Oak and Pierce in the Lower Haight.
Exactly.
Oak and Pierce, 343 Pierce, and we were the basement apartment. And it was me and Patton Oswalt and Blaine Capatch, and also Jeff Hatz at the time. And I don't know if you ever crossed paths with. Jeff Hatz.
He's a name that I kept hearing from all those old comedians, but right. I never really knew him.
They were all from the East Coast. They all at one time were based out of Baltimore. I think there was a club. They worked there a lot, and Washington, D.C. And I never did that world in stand-up comedy, that part of the country. But that's where they came from, and I was a Johnny-come-lately, and met them in San Francisco.
So we met in the comedy world, but comedy wasn't my first love. I fell into it, but my first loves were really science and music. And I wrote songs with a friend of mine, and we really wanted to be rock stars or scientists or both. Scientist by day, rock star at night, or vice versa. Why is it always, if you're an astronomer, maybe you work, the scientist is at night and the rock star can be the day job. But I found my way into comedy, and that led to other stuff, and here I am largely in the science world. But I met you as a comedian, but comedy wasn't your first love either, was it?
No, it's funny when you and I met each other, and quickly, I have a memory. Was it the San Francisco comedy competition?
Oh,
did you ever?
I did an early one. Yeah, before it's what paved the way for me to move there. I forget what year.
To move to San Francisco, and
I moved in '95, so a couple years before that, I did it.
That could have been where we first met. I did the San Francisco competition maybe 3 years in a row while I lived there, and had like everybody, both a wonderful experience with the camaraderie of the other comedians, but then just the nightmare of the day-to-day of everything that goes into it and pitting each other against each other.
And to have your sense of humor judged to 2 decimal places.
Exactly.
They've calculated exactly how funny you are.
Exactly. But to get to your question, when I did stand-up comedy, in hindsight, what I know now is I was actually kind of taking a break from what had already been a 15-year career in music as a drummer. I started working for money, playing professional gigs when I was actually about 13 years old. I had drum teachers that would throw gigs to me that they weren't available to do or didn't want to do. And I grew up playing old school jazz and blues gigs and cover band gigs for wedding receptions, bar mitzvahs at the at the University of Illinois, back before DJs and that whole approach took away work from live musicians to play parties and those kinds of events. That was my upbringing. I was doing that. I never had a proper job. I always made money playing drums, live gigs. Then I started teaching drum lessons. And the indie rock music scene at that time out of Champaign, Illinois was a treasure. And I was always in a band at the time who was trying to be like, the Replacements, REM, The Clash.
And were you always the drummer?
I was always the drummer.
Because, I should say, the reason you're here is that it's been so much fun catching up with you over the past few months. Just a couple months before your album came out last month in February, your second album. Why don't we just... It's available everywhere. Where is everywhere? Spotify,
iTunes, Apple Music. Those are the 3 best places to pick up. Bandcamp. And, you can go to Bandcamp.
Let's test something here. Let's see how does this, there it is. We got a comment. It says, it's Brian Malow. And indeed it is. That's Albert. And the name shows up in everything. Then how do I get rid of it? Just click it. All right. The commenting works. So, I was going to ask you, so you've been a comedian and actor, and I want to hear about some of your acting adventures because I had no idea that you had succeeded to that level. So you got some success as a comedian, got some success as an actor, but music was always your first love. You're a drummer.
Right.
And I'd say, let no one mistake that you're a drummer because there are 2 drum sets behind you in your home studio.
Right, that's where we are.
But you also play. You said you have you play piano, you play some guitar, and you sing. Yeah. What do you identify as? Are you a drummer? Are you a singer? What do you most identify as? A songwriter?
When I'm asked that question, I typically say musician, but I understand where you're coming from. It all started with the drums, and I'll tell you how it got to the piano. I had an incredible drum teacher growing up who would not teach me drum set unless I agreed to study keyboard percussion, which is xylophone, marimba, glockenspiel. They're all the same thing. They just sound different, and they're made of different materials, different kinds of wood or brass. But a xylophone, a marimba, is structured identically to a piano. So I learned all my scales, major, minor key signatures. I learned how chords are built. And playing a xylophone, you're holding mallets. It's kind of like playing the piano with your two index fingers. Okay, that's how it is. So by virtue of learning that, I learned and got a deep understanding of music theory. Excellent. So when I started getting a real interest beyond the drums, which is, rhythm and groove that supports a song, I was always just deeply interested in the architecture of songs and how our songs put together, whether it's structure or these sounds that we're hearing, the chords, and what ingredients are going into the chords. And I had a vague understanding from studying keyboard percussion, which led to piano. I do not play guitar well enough to perform or show up at a blues jam in Nashville and be a hotshot. I always tell folks I know how to play guitar well enough to sit down and write a song in the key of C, the key of E, or the key of G, like a country singer.
What about in the key of G minor augmented? Is that stretching it?
That's
I should have said
in
the key of L.
Yeah, there is a key of G minor. I've learned all that stuff, and and it helps me write, and so I'm capable of playing guitar well enough to finish writing a song. But as far as identification goes, it's evolved from, I don't know if I feel comfortable anymore saying that I am a drummer. I am, and I've worked professionally as a drummer a lot. I play sessions in Nashville, and some real and rewarding high level, around some high level people. But the last 5 or 10 years, my mind and my focus has very much been on songwriting, and now I've just finished putting out a second album, which I still can't believe I've finished writing one song, because I am a late bloomer at this. I always privately wrote songs and lyrics and had a good time with it. Frankly, in my 20s, never thought I'd completed anything worth trying to record. I'd collaborated in bands and contributed lyrics and contributed to finishing songs. Really had only been a co-writer, hadn't done anything all by myself. So I started really focusing on writing songs in my 30s, and I started finishing them in my 40s. So
interesting, yeah. And since you write the music and the lyrics, how do songs usually come about for you? And we're going to listen to some of your music as well. But do they typically evolve? I'm going to half expect that it's not always the same, but sometimes with a lyric, sometimes with a musical riff. How do songs? How do you like? Where do your songs come from, and what makes it? I've always wondered this about bands. Like, have you ever written a song? I've had this as a comedian. You tell a joke, and someone goes, "That doesn't sound like you," but it's like, I wrote it. So, like, what makes a Matt North? Have you ever what defines it as a Matt North song? Who is Matt North? If you had to give, I didn't prepare you for this, like an elevator pitch. Who is Matt North?
Here we go. I don't know.
I apologize.
It's a question. We've just gone through 4 questions in a row. I can answer the question about
where do the songs come from? How do they start?
Well, it's a similar experience that you deeply understand when an idea strikes you that it's a good idea for a premise for a joke, and I call it the light bulb moment. It's when that light bulb goes off in your head, and you've heard another person say something that it's funny, but they don't do stand-up comedy. But you're going to take that little line and you're going to turn it into something commercial. You're going to turn it into something useful for your stand-up act. I learned this through stand-up, and I've transferred it into songwriting. And basically it just means my memory of being a writer, trying to be a comedy writer and getting into that. You just develop these antennas at the top of your head, and you make observations in your everyday life. You hear other people say things. You see something with your eyes. You hear something with your ears. And you develop a sixth sense to know, a lot of stuff's going in at one ear and out the other, and it's not notable. But when you hear something or observe something that's notable that could be used creatively, as a comedian, I wrote it down in my notebook. And the more I started paying attention, I remember going through phases where I was amazed at how much stuff was coming my way. And it kind of made me, God, it's always this way, actually, if we're paying attention, if our antennas are up catching all that stuff. It's the same way with music. A lot of my songs, if I had to tell you one way they've started the most, they've all started in different ways. The way for me it started the most is with language. Probably because before I was really focused on songwriting, I did stand-up professionally, which is a language-driven art form. I can notice a line or something if I know, oh, that's a good title for a song. And a lot of the songs on this recent record started at that most simple place. Yeah. There's a song called "Top of the Fridge" on the record, and I just remember, that's my place in my house. It's the one place of my house that I can control. Nobody can reach it. I'm the tallest person in my house, and it's where I keep all my important stuff. And we always refer to it as the top of the fridge. And in my home, we probably said top of the fridge for years.
Oh, wow. And before it finally one day it kind of clicked.
One day it kind of clicked. And so to get into taking one song and talking about the birth of one song, I just knew top of the fridge. Wouldn't it be cool to write a song called Top of the Fridge? And it started just like that, almost like an English assignment. So you go write a song about the top of your refrigerator. And it goes in all kinds of directions from there. Now, that song was a lot of hard work. I'm still surprised I was able to finish it. Yeah. And I just decided. I wasn't coming from any deep confessional place, but it has to somehow come into some personal expression. And so I recalled while writing the song that the top of the fridge in the house that I grew up was my father's special place. And I've adopted that. And so the third verse of the song Top of the Fridge is almost like a flashback in a movie. We go through the verse, chorus, and when we get to the final part of the song, we go back in time to On My Father's Old Fridge. And I go into that. And, so in a way, it's a song about my father, but I'm talking about a refrigerator. So maybe what, you know what I mean? And
I'll tell you. I just pulled up the lyrics, and, I was going to say that it's clear to me, it's not that obvious. I was going to say that the fact that you're a comedian shows up in your lyrics, but not in a wacky, they might be giants or Weird Al or anything like that. It's more like just a cleverness and a bit of wordplay, and just a certain kind of cleverness. And then this stuff, it does seem very personal. Is like when you say, talking about on the top of the fridge, your top secret place, a jar of raspberry preserves, they come in the mail from your hippie mother-in-law on the Oregon Trail. Is that right out of your life? That's not a made-up fact. That's your life?
Oh, that's autobiographical. I have the coolest mother-in-law in the world. She lived in Eugene, Oregon, and grew weed and shipped it to me in a raspberry preserves jar. There you go. There we are.
So there are no preserves. Okay, I saw that coming.
There's no raspberry preserves. That's marijuana, mother.
Well, I see. There's this later verse where you said, every night around 10, maybe 9:45, I'm like a big brown bear getting in a beehive. We go buzz,
I
buzz,
go
buzz.
buzz, buzz,
yeah,
buzz.
The buzz.
This is a song about. Okay, Brian. This is a song about where I keep my weed.
Okay.
And
I thought it was about more than what. Like I thought the raspberry preserves were up there, and then here's some other things that are up there. But it's really just about your weed stash there, and it says, "My doctor said it's legal. Ain't afraid of the fuzz on the top of the fridge."
Sure. There you go.
That's not the first song I was gonna play, but let's play a little of it, and let's listen to the beginning, and then we'll end up talking over it and let it play some. But I was gonna play your first song on the album. Boom! It starts off, but this is like the 8th song on the album. Really nice. Top of the Fridge, Matt North.
On the top of the fridge, my top secret place, where I stash all my treasure nothing else can replace. A jar of raspberry preserves that come in the mail from my hippie mother-in-law on the Oregon Oregon Trail. She's been growing those berries back deep in the woods. When harvest time comes, she's the gal with the goods. You take a Ziploc bag, drop a jar inside. Nothing hazardous or perishable is shipped nationwide. To the top of the fridge, the top of the fridge, on the top of the fridge.
The top of the fridge that only you can reach.
Yeah. There you go. And I should say real quick, there's a video coming out for this song that I made with Ungayo Bilam.
Really, of all people. So that's why.
Of all people.
There's such a connection there. I didn't realize.
Thank you. And he portrays, I'll just give it away a little bit without giving it away. He was so great to work with. I flew to San Francisco to do this with him. And he played the role of my hippie mother-in-law. He went full on Monty Python, put on the wig, wears the dress, and what's really great is he also, in the third verse, changes costumes and plays the role of my father. So it's wacky, but it's going to be really cool. And since the song mentions my hippie mother-in-law, something I've never had a chance to talk about in any interview is how cool my mother-in-law is and how much she's influenced my music career. My mother-in-law is Shelley Green, and she was an A&R representative for MCA Records in the 1970s, and she was the A&R rep that brought Elton John to America when he was breaking and did all the legendary Troubadour shows. Shelley represented The Who when they were on MCA, and she also was on the team that brought the Sex Pistols to America. Now, when I put out this album...
Yeah, I remember you sharing this. I saw some of this on your Instagram, and I was like, what? The Elton John thing is more epic than most people know. He burst onto the scene, he did this series, and everyone in the music business was at those shows.
Yes.
She was there.
And she made it happen. She lives 30 feet away from me right now. We built a cottage for her behind our house here in Nashville, and she's here with us. And something just kind of funny, all my advice for how to put out music and market music, I have these strategy sessions with my mother-in-law in the cottage, in my backyard. And I'm getting advice from a top-level former A&R executive who repped some of the most iconic artists in history from a decade of music that's probably the decade that influenced me the most. And she's my mother-in-law, and so it's
amazing.
It's really cool.
Just figuring that out when you're like most people, there's it's a pretty stereotypical jokes to make for comedians to joke about mother-in-laws. Not even limited to comedians. That joke is so broad that it's way beyond comedians. People talk about their mother-in-laws, and when you found out that your mother-in-law had this music connection, you must have been gone nuts.
Oh, I couldn't believe
it. That's amazing.
When I first started dating my wife, early on, the first time I went into her apartment, right there on the wall, she goes, "Oh, there's my mother," and it's a picture of her mother with Keith Moon. And,
as many people have.
just like everyone else's parents. And but I appreciate something you were saying about the whole songwriting thing that is something I've been very insecure about and tried very deliberately not to let fall into my songwriting, is to do joke songs in the spirit of They Might Be Giants or Weird Al Yankovic. It's just not what I want to do, but I really think humor is important, and humor works great in rock and roll. I've been very influenced by John Prine and his songwriting.
I'm not my next door neighbor, 30 feet that direction, is huge. Is a huge fan.
John Prine and also Chris Christopherson. If you listen to Chris Christopherson, his album Jesus Was a Capricorn, it's hard not to laugh. But he wasn't writing joke songs. John Prine, he will make you double over laughing, but he's not telling jokes.
But they're not joke songs. Yeah.
No, it's kind of like there's that saying, comedy really is a lot of times just my way of being dead serious. And I think a lot of comedians in many ways find some of their best jokes that way, and we get big laughs that way, but underneath it, we're being serious, but for some reason, something about
and people like Tom Waits is very funny, but in that way, and Warren Zevon, and you know who I love, Stan Ridgway, what he's evolved into is he's really interesting and quirky, and when it's funny, it's like you're talking about. It's funny in a really interesting, smart way. It's not goofy funny. It's not. And nothing against, we like funny stuff. Like I love They Might Be Giants, and I like Weird Al Yankovic,
yeah, they're great.
But that's just a different thing.
Right, and I feel when I write songs, if a lyric comes out of me that makes me smile or makes me laugh, what a mistake not to find a way to fit it in. And I think in songs, if the listener smiles or laughs, and you give them that emotion, they will be willing to go with you to darker places. So it's almost kind of a trade-off. It's like, hey, I really want to go to these other places. So over here, I'm going to make you smile. And I will tell you, as a stand-up comic in my little recess from music, when I did stand up professionally for about a term of 10 years, that was what I grew very tired with. I realized this is just one of the most pure forms of performance. It's an incredible art form. And I'm allowed to land on one result, getting a laugh. If you're a novelist, if you're a songwriter, if you're doing other things, you're allowed to elicit a different response out of your audience. When you do stand-up, you're required. It's not that you can't make people think or feel other things along the way to the joke, but it is your requirement if you're going to do stand-up in clubs and those people have a 2-drink minimum and paid what they paid to get in. They want everything you're saying to lead toward one destination, and that's a laugh. And on one hand, that's what's beautiful about the art form, but that's also, to me, became a restriction. I just felt like there was other things I wanted to do.
Yeah. A couple lines that I think of in this context from your new album. Well, the final song is called Plan B, and it says, if God has a plan, what's Plan B? I like that. And I reinvented reinventing. Clever little line. Do I have that right? I reinvented reinventing?
You've got that right. Yeah, that was in my comedy notebook for years. See, I scour through my old comedy notebooks, and I find stuff. I see stuff that I couldn't find a way to work it into a joke. But as one line in a lyric, it works because doesn't matter if you laugh or not. It's a song.
Right. I love it. So, so you live in Nashville. You wrote these 10. I like that it's 10 songs. The album's only 32 minutes long, like 3.5 minute pop rock. What is it? Is it Americana? Would you call it? It's like Nashville rock. It sounds like it's a lot like what I like, and the musicians you play with some people that I like. I want to ask you about that. So, 10 songs, short, good, not short, but 3.5 minute pop songs. 10 of them on the album, and it's a breezy listen all the way through. It's really solid. No offense, but when your friend has an album, you hope that's good. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, because I gotta say something complimentary about it. But it's like, I've been listening to this album a lot for the past few months. Man. It's fantastic. I really love it. It's the best new album I've listened to in a long time. And Thank you. I can honestly say that. Thank God. Made it easy on me.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm always nervous when I share anything I record with friends because I know there's an obligation as a friend to give some kind of response. And the funny thing is it's as friends, there aren't any friends who get back to you and go, hey, I listened to your album. Wasn't into it. Didn't get it. I got it down. Like friends are always.
I know, so you're not going to get that negative feedback. Everyone says it's great. Well, how come nobody bought it? Well, it's great. Right. You're fine.
And your question about genre, if it's Americana, I feel it falls under an Americana definition. I feel it's good old American rock and roll with hopefully an emphasis on the roll. And what I mean by that is, when people talk about rock music, I imagine kids, and this is fine. It's just not, just the going to the audience and you're doing this. That to me is rock. Rock and roll is a little bit more of this, a little bit more shimmy and a little bit more sexuality. That and is rock and roll.
There's some kind of Nashville flavor there. You know what? Speaking of old friends, absolutely. I just want to say, let's see, how do we get this up here? How do I do it? Oh, there. Tim Schlecht is an old friend of mine, who is an even older friend of Mitch Hedberg's. That's how I met him through when we worked on a movie. We made a movie with Mitch many years ago, right at the tail end of the last century. And so, hello, Tim. Good to see you out there.
Mitch Hedberg had a big influence on my writing in a tiny way. I'll take just a tiny moment, if I may, since we both love him and miss him. When I spent a lot of time with Mitch around the time we both did the Montreal Comedy Festival together, and we both had the same manager for a period of time. I loved his jokes. I loved his style. And all I'm saying is I just got one of these little glimpses into his notebook where he showed me something he was writing. And it was really, I was always amazed at how he could do what he did. And a lot of his jokes are less than 10 seconds long if you put a stopwatch to it. And Mitch kind of influenced how I write lyrics. I just saw he filled up a page with just spitting out everything that was in his brain. And then he'd go back and red pen words that he realized he didn't need at all to tell the joke. And so he would start by overdoing it. And then after that, it was just all subtraction. And now Mitch never took me aside in the spirit of, here, Matt, let me teach you how to do this. I think we all as comedians learned by virtue of getting near people that we admire who are maybe more experienced than us, and just by getting near people who do it the way we aspire to do it someday, we learn. And Mitch was one of those people for me, observing how he just filled up his notebook and then cut away and cut away and cut away and cut away. He worked a lot harder than I think people might assume. I always saw him working and writing, and then that motivated me to do it.
Yeah. So, hey, Tim, good to see you. We should catch up again soon. And Albert is watching. Tim is up in the Pacific Northwest. Oregon? Seattle? Was it Seattle? And Albert's watching from Texas. Let's talk about one other thing about comedy writing, because you did live with Blaine and Patton.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody knows Patton. Blaine, I always thought was even funnier, and he's gone on. Find Blaine Capatch on Twitter. He's worth following. Yeah. He's so funny, nonstop. How many jokes? When he has an idea, he spits out 10 different joke versions of it, and he's just so funny. And I think you told me a story about observations you made about Patton Oswalt's writing ethic, really.
Yeah. Yeah, Patton, I would say more so than Mitch, because I lived with Patton. It was a good 2 years. We were all down in the lower Haight-Ashbury. Now, I always say the good fortune I had to be roommates with Patton Oswalt and Blaine Capatch was, I compare it to being a sophomore in college who got to move in with a couple of guys who were just wrapping up their PhDs. They had been doing comedy a lot longer than me. They were at that point where they were scratching the ceiling. They were everybody knew how good they were. Everyone in the comedy world knew who they were. And Hollywood was starting to discover them. It was very exciting. I got to be their roommate at the time. The big first job writing for Mad TV came along for both of them.
Yeah.
What I saw, and so, again, by virtue of getting near that, neither of them ever took me aside. Blaine actually did quite frequently when I thought I had a premise for a joke and wanted to run something by him. He was wonderful. He always listened and always pointed me in the right direction, taught me a lot about writing. Patton was different in the sense, I kind of joke around. He was one of my only roommates, you know, where when you're done rooming with someone, you have maybe a memory of a day where there was a little argument or something negative. We never did not get along. You know, I have no memory of him and me as roommates not getting along or anything.
Yeah.
Because the guy was always in his room writing. I'd come home, and like I told you earlier, I enjoyed my time in San Francisco bopping around town. And when I'd stumble back home into the apartment, his door was closed. I could see the light on under there, and I could hear the keyboard clicking away. And same thing happened the next day. Same thing happened the next day. And I just observed, oh, this is how you do it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Patton, I feel like I got to witness what very few people have witnessed. I witnessed how hard he works, you know, and getting near that at a time where I wanted to have the skills. I had material. I was writing. I wasn't working hard enough. And so getting around someone who did do the work and seeing it, and then being lucky enough to see him get rewarded for it. You know,
and more than just luck, because that's one of the things about being a comedian. It's such a social job, and so often we spend more time like loving that we're comedians and we have this freedom to do what we want, and we socialize and we hang out for hours after a show because we're amped up after performing, and you got that adrenaline.
Right.
But there's always been some people. It was my friend Joey who is deceased, but he was like a one beer kind of guy, and he would go home and paint or draw or write, and for hours into the night while everyone else continued to drink and smoke more and hang out at the club longer.
Yeah, and I feel that was very much Patton. He was social. He was always professional when he was in a club, but then you turn your head and he's gone. You know,
dedication.
He's on his way. Yeah, he's a real disciplined guy, and I just have great memories of being roommates with him and all the things that I, you know, vicariously just by being near him learned. He has no idea what I learned by being that close to him and then watching his success grow year after year. But it's had a huge impact on me and Blaine Capatch as well.
That's excellent. So let's take a listen to some of the first track on your new album. It's Bullies in the Backyard. Did I get that right?
That's right.
There's no title cut. So why is it called Bullies? So why Bullies in the Backyard?
Oh, I'll tell you. I'll try to be brief. All these 10 songs were written under a very dark cloud of a 7-year lawsuit that my family was in against Nashville public schools for my son's special needs. I have a son who was born with a rare genetic deletion that for years we did not know what was causing his challenges. Some folks thought it might be autism. Others thought it might be Asperger's. No expert could give that formal diagnosis. Turns out he has a genetic deletion, meaning, since you're the science comedian, I will say he has genes in his DNA that he was born without. His geneticist explained it best, saying that it's as if your DNA is your body's instruction manual to know what to do while it's developing. And my son was born with several pages of his instruction manual missing, and they will never come back. There's no shot we can give him, no pill we can give him to put those genes into him. However, he is a very unique person, a very unique learner, and we were and based on the rights children with disabilities have in American educational systems, Metro Nashville public schools, we were able to prove about 17 federal violations on my son and for his that were harmful to his education. And these are lawsuits that schools will fight to the bitter end. And this was the David and Goliath fight of my life. If we didn't, fortunately, we won, and we were able to prove that public school was not able to appropriately educate him, and they put him in a private setting for students who are like my son at their expense, which is these are the lawsuits that they happen frequently in this small unpublicized world of special education that only parents of children with disabilities understand intimately. But this has defined my time in Nashville, and connecting it to what got me into really writing songs. I was not able to pursue the music career I came to Nashville to pursue as a drummer. It was very clear that my son needs me to focus on his education and to fight this lawsuit and to work with him at home. My son doesn't stop learning at 3 o'clock. He requires a lot of extra support at home. So in the time that I did have, because I wasn't bouncing around Nashville the way we do as comedians and socialize in order to advance our careers, I stayed at home. Well, what can I do to stay connected to music if I'm staying at home? I can write songs. It was that thing of what can I control, what can I not control? What I love about writing is I don't need to ask anyone's permission. I don't need to go on an audition, and it doesn't cost any money. So I threw myself into writing songs. Now, these 10 songs of Bullies in the Backyard. Bullies in the Backyard represent the fleet and the team of city attorneys that got together every morning to plot and plan to destroy my son's education. Those are the bullies of our life that became the title of this album. And these 10 songs, as you know, are not 10 songs about special education or disabilities.
No, not at all. And I don't even know that they're all. Yeah, there's. Know. Yeah, there's definitely some other stuff that we've talked about, like Hollywood Forever, which we resonate with. Let's hear a little. The first track on the album is called "The Last Angry Man" by Matt North. Here it goes. Organ, the horns, and that electric guitar. So you there's so much to ask you about here, but you played with some really good musicians and you produced the album yourself, largely in your home studio and the home studios of these other musicians. Yeah, right here, and in the home studios, correct, of the other musicians on the album. I mean, we can go down any questions you have, and this song is a great one to use to kind of branch out how I did the whole record. Yes, I'm so impressed with the arrangement. Like, who are you? You're just some comedian. You're just some drummer who has a little music theory. But the layering of the horns come in. I feel like I know that. Well, you have drums, bass, guitar, organ, horns, vocals. And maybe more, and to try to fit that all into the stereo space and make it things not conflict with each other. It's really a beautiful album. And I know at the final step of the process, you sought out some very professional, extraordinary talent, but you produced it and arranged it. Tell me something about the process. Yes. Okay.
after I write a song, I mean, it's all there on paper. And I either go to a piano or guitar, work out the chords that it's going to be.
Oh, you may have done it in your head, like you may have kind of worked it, like you have a melody and lyrics that you're.
Oh yeah.
And you're not even at any instrument.
Correct. What I typically do is when the lyrics and the whole, let's say I just have, maybe even if the song isn't complete, but I've got a verse and I've got a chorus. The first thing I do is I get behind my drums, and I think that's what makes me a little different as a songwriter. I will get behind a drum set and just play the drums and sing a la Lee Von Helm with the band.
Yeah.
Don Henley, played drums and sang for the Eagles. Well, there's something special about what happens in the way you find the rhythm of how you're going to phrase a lyric, because it's very connected to what the drummer is doing with the kick drum and the snare drum. So, well, I'm the same guy, so I get behind the drum set and I find two things. I find the tempo of the song and I find the groove of the song that fits like a glove with the lyrics I've written. And in my imagination, because I've listened to albums my whole life, I can hear the general chords that are going to be behind it from the bass guitar and the guitar. Once I have that in my mind, then I sit down at the piano and I find what those chords are. And I figure it out, whether it's on a piano or a guitar. And then the first thing I do is I record the drums by myself in my studio. And that's the first thing that goes down. And I throw on a reference or a demo piano track on top of what I did so that the notes are there. And then I sing the lyrics over it. So what I have is drums, something giving the chords, whether it's a guitar or a piano, and then I sing the lyrics. I take that, and we did this pandemic style. I always love to be in a room with other musicians. We didn't have the luxury to do that over the last couple of years.
So this was mostly recorded or entirely recorded during the pandemic. It just came out in the last month, so February 2022, and you were recording it through the pandemic. Okay.
Yeah. And like all the drums and everything had been done at home on my own over the last 5-6 years or so here and there. But I realized, I got an album in me, and I think I can finish this. So I have my little demo, like I mentioned, with drums, vocal, piano. I send that out. First place I go is the bass guitarist. The bass guitarist is Chris Donohue. Chris Donohue is the regular bass guitarist for Emmylou Harris. And he has worked with Elvis Costello. And also he's played bass for Robert Plant in his solo stuff. So Chris and I met in Nashville as a drummer with recording sessions, and and then I just hit people up. Hey, I write my own songs. Would you play on them? And la la la. Same thing of making friends in comedy who can get you into a club, Yeah. And so I'm lucky. That's who I got to play bass on the record. He throws bass on. Then I got
that's amazing.
Drums and bass. And I'll say this now, why I think this album, what I'm most pleased about is I feel it sounds like we all played together in the same room. It does not sound like there's a disconnection.
Yeah.
The reason for that, the whole production side to it, is if the drums go on first and you start with a solid foundation of drums and bass, well, then everything else layers on top of it naturally. And I compare everything to how musicians think and feel when they play live. If it's a good band, well, then it's a band that has a great drummer. And every musician in live performance in a band with a great drummer, they are locking into that drummer and coming to that drummer. Their ears are connected to the drummer. The drummer has to be like an anchor that holds the whole ship together. So if the recording starts off that way, I deal with a lot of purists who, you didn't record it with everyone in the same room. No, but it sounds like I did. Yeah. Number one, there was a pandemic. Number two, if I start off with solid bass and drums and everyone's coming to the drummer after the fact, it will feel and sound like we were in the same room. Because even when bands record together, well, the last thing you do, how many, guitarists, come in last and spend 3 days on one guitar solo overdubbing. Vocalists come in and sing the vocals, the final vocal track, completely separate and disconnected from the band. Albums for decades have been getting made pandemic style, remotely, on different days. Now, there's a lot of great music that I love that was all done with everyone in the same. Ray Charles albums, they were all in the same room. He was singing the vocal in the same room to the extent where the horns on the other side of the room were bleeding into his vocal mic. That's great stuff. My whole point is, I don't care how we get it done.
Yeah.
All I care about is, what do we have when we're done? Are we happy with it? Does it feel good? Does it groove? And if the answer is yes, I don't care what we went through to get there. So I went through one at a time and sent the music out with drums and bass. The next stop was typically the guitarist.
You have some amazing, there's some amazing guitar work on this album. Just the sound of it. It's, so who's your guitarist?
Stuart Mathis. Stuart Mathis, for the last 11 years, has been the lead guitarist for Lucinda Williams. Before that, he was in the Wildflowers. He plays for Jacob Dylan. And,
so you're just a couple steps away from Bob Dylan there. A couple degrees from Bob Dylan.
A couple degrees. And Stuart Mathis, he's one of these guys. He's exactly what I'm always looking for. While it's on my mind, I guess maybe the number one thing I love about making music is not necessarily my own music or the feeling of watching my own thing come together. Nothing excites me more than getting around talent. And that's what I loved about comedy. It was fun to grow and develop as a comedian, but I think what really excited me about the whole culture of comedy was just being around so much talent and so many special people. You, Blaine, Mitch, Patton, everybody, it was my thing that fueled me and gave me energy was getting near other people that were so special. And when I get around Stuart Mathis, that's someone I'm around. Like, he plays guitar and thinks about the guitar and perceives the guitar like no other guitarist I've ever met.
So I would think that sometimes you might imagine you might have some ideas. Do you tell him much about what you want? And then does he sometimes come back with something that, oh my God, you never would have imagined that and it's perfect?
Yeah, I'm going to tell Stuart to listen to this part of the interview, actually, because I've tried to tell him what to do, but he doesn't do what I tell him to do, and then he does something that makes me go, "Hey man, just forget it. Whatever I told you to do, just keep doing what you're doing." And
I was wrong.
So again, so here's a whole producer mentality. I produce every musician differently, because I go one at a time in this style of recording. Now, there's a saying I like. It's a mistake to try to put a saddle on a Mustang. The guys I hire are all Mustangs, and it's a huge mistake to put them in a box with too many restrictions. Because if you just let them go and let them do what they want, what they send you, it's going to be fine. It's going to be beautiful. And it's going to be something I never imagined. And what I learned making this album was, the real joy of it was, I came to a point of, I don't want what's in my imagination. I'm hiring these guys to give me what's in their imagination. In the end, it's my album, it's my song. But they're like incredible actors in a movie who come in and make the screenwriter go, I never knew the scene could work that way. And that's what great musicians do. That's what Stuart Mathis does. He's a guitarist that changed my mind on every song. I had a vision for how a song might sound, a direction it might go. Stuart does what he does, sends me the guitar files. I listen to it, and it just freaks me out. I would have to, sometimes it was so far away from what I was envisioning. The rule I made for myself was, I am just going to accept what they send me. I'm not going to be the producer that micromanages and goes back and says, well, what you did, you played it well, but it's not like I was thinking. Well, he can't read my mind. And I thought, what if I just accept what they send me and shut up and live with it for a week? There was only one song where I really had to go back to Stewart, and there was just a piece in the arrangement, a couple notes that I really wanted him to play for the song to work.
Yeah.
But every other song, I lived with what he sent me, and it was always completely different from what I thought the song was going to be. But I just lived with it. And then after about a week, I couldn't live without it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because I connect it to how we perceive, even like this has happened to me so many times. You go to see a movie or you listen to something and you have certain expectations and it's not at all what you expected and you don't like it. But then the next time I see that movie, now that I know that it's not that and it's this other thing, I embrace it for what it is, and my preconceptions are set aside. And so, like, it takes you a week to get out of your head and go, okay, forget what I wanted. Let me really listen to what he's doing and go, oh, I see.
Yeah.
I get it,
in the end, it's really a band album. I mean, we're not a band. These guys, I paid them, and they were session musicians, but another thing I'm really proud of with this album is all 10 songs, it's the same core group of guys. It's the same keyboardist, bassist, guitarist. I did not do this like Nashville session music style where I called whoever was available that day.
Great take. Yeah, that's great. So there's a consistency across the whole album.
Yeah, this is a band. And
who else? So who are we leaving out? Okay. You named your bass player and your guitarist.
Michael Webb, keyboards. He did piano, Wurlitzer, Hammond B3, all the organ work. Michael Webb, he's from Columbia, Kentucky. He toured in the 90s, did a lot of touring with John Fogerty when John Fogerty was, having his comeback period with the song Center Field and all that era. Michael Webb.
Around when he got sued for sounding too much like himself?
Yes.
Do you remember?
And right. And but Michael Webb recently two acts where I discovered him. There's a producer out of Nashville, a real successful guy, Dave Cobb. Dave Cobb produced Sturgill Simpson and Chris Stapleton, Jason Isbell, some great Americana singer-songwriters. And Dave Cobb hires Michael Webb to play on all of those albums. So all kinds of Grammy award-winning records. Michael Webb's on them. Michael Webb I'm always thrilled that he returns my phone call, honestly, just that I can get him. He's almost unattainable. He's so busy. It's hard to find. And here's my thing about Michael. He is classically trained. He studied music in college. And a lot of great keyboardists are typically classically trained. So because of that, it's hard to find a keyboardist that understands rock and roll piano, a la Richard, a la Jerry Lee Lewis. Rock and roll piano is a real special quality. The way another great keyboardist, Nikki Hopkins, who played on the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street. He played on a lot of stuff for The Who. He was the busiest session keyboardist in London around that time. It's just real hard to find a guy who gets rock and roll and can put it onto a keyboard. And that's where Michael Webb lives, so all these guys are just top flight,
That's like, I feel like, if I'm remembering right, just for the beginning of one of the last tracks, Burial Grounds starts off with some serious guitar, doesn't it? Doesn't it have kind of a rocking opening?
Yeah, real little grungy, little kind of Kurt Cobainish kind of sound.
Let's
I love
hear
that.
a little
Stewart,
beginning of this one. This is from towards the end of the album.
There is a ticket prices, and
like this doesn't sound particularly Americana, Nashville, country, less.
No.
Do you do all the vocals?
Yes, I do all the lead vocals. But the backup vocals, no.
Okay.
I kept it consistent. I didn't hire a bunch of different backup vocalists. 3 of the songs. This song has Siobhan Marr Kennedy. She's singing backup vocals. She was in a band on Geffen Records in the 90s called the River City People. She's from Liverpool. And what I love about her singing style is you can hear a little bit of her British accent coming through it. The other backup vocalist I hired is a guy I've been a fan of for a long time. He's a great singer-songwriter. His name's Johnny Polonsky. Johnny Polonsky is, he's from Illinois like me. He's from Chicago. Fascinating thing about Johnny Polonsky, Rick Rubin signed him to American Records when Johnny was 19 years old.
Wow.
And Johnny has put out about 13 records since then. And his debut record that Rick Rubin produced, it's called Hi, My Name is Johnny Polonsky. And it is something everyone should run out and pick up and listen to. He's just a great, Johnny's really influenced by Frank Black and the Pixies and that whole world. And so I'm a huge fan, and I called him up to say, I need backup vocals on these, and I don't want it to be me, and I don't want it to be a different guy on every song. So the first thing we had to do was find out, you know what, you can have two really good singers and discover that their voices just don't blend.
Right.
And this is just what a great guy and what a great musician Johnny is. I just said, hey, I'm going to pick one song and send it to you, and I'll pay you, but I really want to see if we blend. But I'm not going to ask you to audition. I'm not going to ask you for free work. And he sent me back, I think we did the song Plan B and the final track. And he sent it back, and our voices blend really well together. And he gives it a special character. There's only one other song with a real special singer on it. It's kind of a duet. It's track 5. It's called Holding It Together. And a singer out of San Francisco named Jesse DiNatale did that vocal track as a duet with me in the choruses and other moments in the song. He is my all-time favorite songwriter. And I think he's one of these guys. He just lives under the radar. If it was 1972, he would no doubt be swooped up by a record label and have huge success. He's just one of these guys, in a different era, in a different time. I really think a record label might have chosen him over Van Morrison.
Did you say that was Holding It Together?
Yes.
I know that, and I know you, it's hard to pick favorites. I don't have a favorite song on the album, I don't think. I don't yet, but let's hear a little of Holding It Together. I reinvented reinventing.
Right.
Right below the surface, where a landmine sits, one wrong move blow us all to bits. I've been bumping into things, I've been spilling all my drinks, my gutter's overflowing, and I watch while the foundation sinks. I've been laying low, I blame it on the weather, I don't want anyone to know.
I assumed that was you.
I'm over here trying to hold it together.
Okay, interesting. I totally assumed that was you.
Jesse, I feel he put that song over the top, because when you listen to Jesse's recordings and his own songs, my opinion, nobody has a voice like him. And it's a song where the character telling the story is not in a good place, in a shaky kind of place. And I wanted Jesse's voice to kind of be like in A Christmas Carol. If I'm Scrooge, I want him to be like the ghost that shows up and is hovering over me. And that's kind of exactly the character that he brought to the song. It just sounds like this haunting ghost-like figure sneaks into the choruses and starts joining in with a call and response.
Wow, that's really nice. Yeah, this has just this very atmospheric, that guitar, And yeah, it's just a really nice sounding album all the way through. I gotta say, like, it's solid, like, you know, and it breezes by. Like I said, 32 minutes, packs in 10 songs. You know, we talked about this one, and let me actually pull up the lyrics for it too. Let's look at. It's the second track on the album, and it's very relatable. Hollywood Forever. We talked about this first line. You were great. We loved you. It was a home run and a bullseye. You couldn't have done it any better. We're going to go with the other guy. And let's listen to a little of that, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
You were great. We loved you. It was a home run and a bullseye. You couldn't have done it any better. We're gonna go with the other guy. Maybe next time, maybe next year. So they leave you in the dark. You never knew it hurt so bad, coming so close and missing the mark. I'll be at the Formosa Cafe for most of the day. I'll be down in Hollywood forever, below a wilted bouquet. I'll find my own watering hole for the head cold in my soul, and they'll keep serving you a mayonnaise sandwich on a silver tray.
Serving you a mayonnaise sandwich on a silver tray. Those horns were so... Did you imagine the horn? I don't even know where to start with you. I wanted to talk about the lyrics, but did you imagine the horns? Like, you...
That came to me over the course of recording the song, layering out layer after layer. I just realized, oh, I got to put horns onto this, because this is a real Chris Christopherson, John Prine inspired kind of song. And it's funny, I go into every recording thinking, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on this. I'm going to do this cheap. And then next thing you know, I'm hiring a horn section. Because, you know, you have to. This is important. I don't want to finish recordings and put out recordings with that piece of me that wishes I put a horn section on it. I got the idea for the horns because I was listening to a Chris Christopherson mega hit, the song Loving Her Was Easier. That was one of his biggest hits in the 70s, and that song starts off like a folk song, and it builds and builds, and it becomes more and more orchestral, and by the time you get to the third chorus, there's this big horn section just blowing it out. So I ripped off that template shamelessly and I put those ingredients into this song. When I wrote this song, I did not hear horns. There's a cello in this song that enters right after the first chorus that kind of brings you into that nice orchestral feel. And this I gotta say, I keep going back to this song as probably maybe my favorite song on the record, because it's a simple song, but so many people like it, and it clearly came from my feelings of frustration with having opportunities dangled in front of me and not handed to me, or having things handed to me and taken away from me.
Yeah, those opening lines, just like it, you did great, we loved you, but no, we're not, we're hiring somebody else. What?
Well, I feel it doesn't matter if you're in show business or not. I think a lot of people relate to that. And that's my favorite part of writing songs, is when folks come back and, you know, when I release the song, it's not for me or about me anymore. It's about how the listener feels when they listen to it and what they think in their mind. And when I've had people in other careers who have listened to that song say, you know, I went on a job interview and I thought I had it.
Yeah.
And so, but
you also, I don't know, this may not be specific to this song. It could have been the last one, but Mark Kaplan wrote, it brings to mind Little Feat. How about Little Feat? Are they, I never knew them very well. I don't really know Little Feat.
Oh man, they're great. They're an amazing band. I like them a lot. And I've listened to them. It's funny. I have a pretty wide, diverse record collection, And I don't go into writing a song, or I don't go into recording anything with a result in my mind. I'm not thinking I'm going to make a Little Feat song. I'm going to make a Chris Christopherson song. It's still all me. I don't think I'm going to make an Americana album. And like you said, if you listen to Burial Grounds, there's a lot of more Nirvana-esque guitar sounds in there.
Yeah.
It all threads together because it's all coming from me. It's my lyrics. It's my voice. And it's the same musicians. That's kind of my philosophy. I mean, I work really hard to bring some diversity. You know, these 10 songs, it's 10 different tempos. It's 10 different, it's 10 different key signatures. I auditioned these, I write these songs and then I'll try everything in different key signatures. And it's all about, and the decision just gets to the bottom line of what does it sound best coming from whoever's singing it. Another singer would sing Hollywood Forever in the key of B flat. I sing it in the key of C. But making an album, and this is a real nerdy point to make, if you listen to 5 songs in a row and they're all in the key of G, you're gonna get what's called ear fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And everything gets real boring real fast. And as a drummer, all the years I spent playing drums for different songwriters, I got bored really fast because they'd come into rehearsals with the same tempo, the same key signature. And I knew when I'm making my own songs, since I'm the drummer, I'm going to come up with different beats and different tempos for every song and different key signatures. And, this is 10 songs in a row that all have different feels, different tempos, and different key signatures. So there's no...
I like how I don't know, maybe no accident that the first cut on the album, the first thing you hear, let's hear that again, the first track, the drums. First thing you hear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
We did have I didn't know if you saw this, but Tim said he needed to run out. Thanks for sharing. He enjoyed it. Great work. He's going to check you out. There's so many trophy case, that great line about like just getting a trophy. All you got was a trophy with your name spelled wrong.
Spelled wrong. Yeah. I had that that's an example. That line was in another song that I could never finish.
Right.
And I was writing Trophy Case, and I had the whole chorus in my head, and I needed a way to end the chorus, and I realized, that's a great line to make as a repetitive hook line, and it worked because a lot of folks, that's another line that is fed back to me as one of the favorites on the record. That's a line that I could have maybe said in context as a stand-up, and it might have been a laugh.
Tell me then, so you wrote these songs, you got these musicians, you produced the album, but I don't understand exactly what there's like engineering and mixing and mastering, but you specifically sought out and some interesting talent for the final mix of the album.
Right. I hired Jim Scott. Jim Scott, first of all, I'll always say I'm a big believer that you get what you pay for. Some of the most frustrating projects I've been a part of where I wasn't in charge, where I wasn't the producer, it was a person in charge who was doing everything they could not to spend a dime. And everything falls apart. Everything sounds bad. Everyone's getting frustrated. I really believe in hiring people. If you can hire the right people, half the work is done. And what I get when I hire a guy like Jim Scott actually is, number one, his talent. Number two, I get peace of mind. When you mix an album, you're often crossing your fingers, just hoping it comes out sounding good. Well, Jim Scott won the Grammy for mixing Tom Petty's Wildflowers. Jim Scott has mixed the Rolling Stones, Los Lobos, the first 4 Wilco albums. I think the last 5 Tom Petty albums before Tom Petty passed away. But Jim, was the guy behind the sound of all of the Wildflowers recordings.
Wow. And those Wilco albums. I love those Wilco albums.
He did Being There. He did the first one. He did Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. He did, and the ones, the Wilco recordings I love are the partnerships they did with Billy Bragg.
Those are great too. Yeah,
the Mermaid Avenue album. So Jim Scott, his thing is, he records just great old school American rock and roll.
So tell me like what the significance is here. What's the difference between the album before him and the album after he did his work on it? What happened?
A mixing engineer is it's similar to if you've ever painted a wall and what you're really supposed to do is put on 2 coats of paint and you put 1 coat of paint on the wall and you're like, okay, well, it looks good enough. And maybe some part of you knows that the right thing to do is put a 2nd coat of paint on it. And you put the 2nd coat of paint on the wall and wow, I'm so glad I did this.
Yeah.
That's the reaction you get when you hear what a really good mix engineer can do to the music that you've already recorded. When you record raw music into mics, hopefully everything's done in tune. The big secret is to capture a performance. If you don't have that, a mix engineer cannot do much to save that. They can't rescue that. I had to sing in tune. I spend a lot of time before I record drums tuning my drums, picking the right snare drum that I'm going to use. Probably spend about an hour and a half tuning my drums and 15 minutes recording the song. Huh. All that stuff. You got to get all the performances out of the human beings so that the mix engineer is just enhancing and highlighting all of the special sonic moments that the human beings performed. And in rock and roll, especially when you've got a band with guitars, bass, and drums, the best mix engineers in my mind are the ones who keep it simple and approach it similar to the way when you sit in an audience and you watch a band on a stage, so the singer's out front, well, that's where you want your vocal in the mix. And the drums are in the back of the stage, behind the band, well, that's where you want to tuck the drum set, down underneath all that stuff. And everyone's positioned in a different part of the stage. It's very similar in mixing. When you talk to a mix engineer, you'll hear him talking about, it's called spacing, and finding the right space in the sonic landscape of all the different sounds that were recorded. Because everything can't all be put in the same space or it's competing for attention with your ear. And it's right. Just, but what these guys are able to do is take every sound that was recorded and place it. And they find the right placement so that when it's all coming at you as a final recording, it's just this ball of fire coming down the street. And Jim Scott started off mixing live bands. He was the sound man in clubs in LA around the time of the Troubadour when Elton John came. In the scene when Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Browne were playing at the Stone Pony and doing all those things. Jim Scott was the dude doing sound in those clubs. That graduated into doing recording sessions. He worked at the record plant where Fleetwood Mac did Rumors, and he was on staff at the time. So, I got to find one of these guys who these guys aren't going to be around much longer. We're going in a direction. And real quick about what Jim does, he got me on the phone, and before he, I knew I wanted it. I did anything I could to make it work financially. And he just told me, now what you can't do, I got to tell you, I do this old school. He had this board from 1965. He does it all manually, analog. And so what he's warning me, he goes, you're going to come out to LA and do this with me. You got to understand, when we finish mixing a song and we print it, we're done. And we're moving on to the next song. You can't fly back to Nashville and call me a month later and go, hey, the triangle and holding it together, can we make that a little louder? Which was really nice for this process, because when you record digitally, as you know, with all these toys and everything we have in our Macs, you can go down a wormhole and constantly tweak and change and upgrade or downgrade what you've done. which I don't feel is necessarily a good thing. My experience with Jim Scott, I had to make decisions, and we had deadlines, and I could only afford to hire him for 6 days, and we had to get a whole album mixed in 6 days. Normally, it's 2 to 3 weeks, and he really loved
more than
the
a song
songs.
a day. Yeah,
yeah, he loved the songs, really wanted to do it, and he was like, "If you can get here, we'll do it." And he worked. We did 11 or 12-hour days.
Yeah.
And we aimed for 2 songs a day, which is pushing it. And we got it done. And you know, he would get the mixes, and he'd do it really quick. This guy, I've never seen anyone pull something together so quick. But then I listen and I give some notes. Let's change this. Let's a little louder on the triangle or tambourine. Little nitpicky things, and then we print, and that's it.
That's it.
We're done. Can't go back. But to watch him, he's like a new member of the band, because he mixes in real time. They play the song, and he's at the board, moving the faders, moving the knobs live in real time, and that's being recorded.
Yeah.
So when you do things digitally, and I will tell you, the sound is, you know what? Digital recordings, Pro Tools, stuff sounds all right. But when you go back and do it on warm analog tape, I mean, this album, that's what it is. This is old school. We did it with all the gear Jim Scott used was from before 1970. And, you know, so it's just, he was the greatest joy of making this record. It was like I got to spend a week with the Fonz.
Yeah. That's really awesome. You did tell me a while back that like the money was well spent just to sit there watching him work, just to observe and learn from his working, right?
Yes, yeah. Like I said, you know, what I got for, and you know, it's like when I'm making songs, like, and they're really important to me, I don't necessarily want to overthink money, but you know what? It is a reality to this. If you're going to do this stuff right, it's not inexpensive. And the bottom line for me, the reason I talk about money and recording is what we're doing here is we're making something that's permanent. And I don't want to listen to these songs when I'm 80 years old and go, I should have hired Jim Scott. You know, I should have hired that guy. Or we should have done that. I should have hired a horn section. I will not, you know, it's like, it's
why was I?
worth it.
The little bit, I mean, it's not a small amount, but in retrospect, it's like, why did I go cheap? It's like, you could, when you could find the money and do it. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. So the album's out. We should wrap this up. We've talked quite a while, and I happen to have a cat that's making a lot of noises right now, like scratching on things, like telling me that the interview is apparently over in his mind. But the album is fantastic. Let's pull that up again. The album is Bullies in the Backyard, and all right, I was muted there for a minute. But if people want to find out more about you, mattnorth.net. And Matt North Drums, at Matt North Drums is your Twitter handle. But mattnorth.net. And I guess you have an artist page on Spotify where people can find your first album as well.
Right.
And prominently your new album. So, yeah, I really love it. 10 great songs. There's really not a clunker. It's a solid album. I'm really relieved that I can say that.
Right. No, I am too.
So, any other shout-outs you want to give or anything? Did we leave anything out? I think there's plenty we could talk about the art of writing and producing your own album. But way to go. I saw when I shared that we were going to do this on Facebook, Chris Hobbs and Jim Short and a few other comedians from back then. Jim was living with me in your apartment that month, and Chris Hobbs was a San Francisco comic, or Sacramento anyway.
Well, yeah, I'll give a shout out to both of those two guys. They're two of my biggest influences. And by the way, let me say, Chris Hobbs, one of my favorite songwriters, and we were in a band together for 3 to 4 years called the Clutter Family. We put out 2 albums. speaking of Spotify, go to Spotify and listen to the Clutter Family.
With a C, Clutter? Clutter, the word clutter?
Yeah, Clutter. And it's
family.
all it's songwriting team, Chris Hobbs and Jim Earl, and I was the drummer. They put out one record, the first record, just called The Clutter Family. I produced that, and they're brilliant songwriters, and I still go back and listen to those albums regularly, and feel proud to be a part of.
Don't think I knew that. That's amazing. And then Charles Ezell is another old friend of ours that you did recording with back then. He was comedians and musicians, so many. Greg Behrendt, Blaine Capatch,
Karen Kilgariff.
Right.
Margaret Cho.
Oh,
great
really?
singer.
Oh, excellent.
She's a really good singer. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not going to claim to be a great singer, but I'm still really proud of lyrics I wrote to my old friend's music, and hopefully maybe one day we'll do something with that. But yeah, that's really amazing. So congrats. I'm so glad we've gotten back in touch. And I'll tell you what, stick around for a minute. Let me say that today all the music we heard was by Matt North, mattnorth.net, except our opening theme music that why don't we listen to it as we play out? But maybe a little lower than that. This is Logan Whitehurst. Speaking of other talented young musicians, he was a musician back in San Francisco. Also, tragically died really young from a brain tumor. But the name of the song is Buckaroo Banzai is Not Just a Movie. And you can find him at loganwhitehurst.com and also his Spotify artist page. I'll stick those links for Matt and Logan in the show descriptions. And we'll sign off. So until next time, thanks again to my guest, Matt North. And we'll see you next time.
So he quit his job at the video store, tore off his name tag and walked out the door, jumped in his Beetle and the light turned green. When he got into bed, he had the strangest dream of a giant explosion and a grisly scene of a skull in the burnt up body of a bug.